Hey, first grade, this will be History Lesson 16. Just quickly, as we do history while we're apart, parents, it is important because this is a narration exercise that they are sitting up in their listening posture. They're not laying on a bed or upside down on the couch. That's all fine and good for a lot of other reading. But when we're doing narration, we need to still ourselves and be prepared to do our best listening so that we can do our best narration. So as you're reading our history, well, rather as I'm reading the history and doing that, and as you're doing Bible at home, that is very important that we are in our listening posture, that we are sitting up, we are ready to listen so that we might tell back or narrate to our best ability. We know that if our body is settled, we can do better listening. So this story, the only new word, the people, his name is King Canute. C-A-N-U-T-E, Canute. And he was another king of England. He was a Dane, which means he's from Denmark. Okay? The title of this story is King Canute on the Seashore. All right, everybody's ready to listen? 100 years or more after the time of Alfred the Great, there was a king of England named Canute. King Canute was a Dane, but the Danes were not so fierce and cruel then as they had been when they were at war with King Alfred. The great men and officers who were around King Canute were always praising him. "You are the greatest man that has ever lived," one would say. Then another would say, "O king, there can never be another man so mighty as you." And another would say, "Great Canute, there is nothing in the world that dares disobey you." The king was a man of sense, and he grew very tired of hearing such foolish speeches. One day he was by the seashore, and his officers were with him. They were praising him as they were in the habit of doing. He thought that now would be a good time to teach them a lesson. So he bade them set his chair on the beach, close by the edge of the water. "Am I the greatest man in the world?" he asked. "O king," they cried, "there was no one as mighty as you." "Do all things obey me?" he asked. There is nothing that dares to disobey you, O king," they said. "The world bows before you and gives you honor." "Will the sea obey me?" he asked, and he looked down at the little waves which were lapping the sand at his feet. The foolish officers were puzzled, but they didn't dare to say no. "Command it, O king, and it will obey," said one. "See," cried Canute, "I command you to come no further. Waves, stop your rolling, and do not dare touch my feet." But the tide came in just as it always did. The water rose higher and higher. Here, matter of fact, is King Canute telling the sea, "Stop. Come no further." But the tide came in just as it always did. The water rose higher and higher. It came up around the king's chair and wet not only his feet, but also his robe. His officers stood about him alarmed and wondering whether or not he was mad. Then Canute took off his crown and threw it down upon the sand. "I shall never wear it again," he said, "and do you, my men, learn a lesson from what you have seen. There is only one king who is all-powerful, and it is he who rules the sea and holds the ocean in the hollow of his hand. It is he whom you ought to praise and serve above all others. Okay, and that's the story of King Canute. Now, I'm going to give you a prompt, and then I want you to pause and do your narration. Here's your prompt. 100 years or more after the time of Alfred the Great, there was a king of England named Canute. Pause and do your narration. Then rejoin me as I give you a little bit of reflection and application questions. Pause. Okay, here after your fantastic narration, I'm sure you just did with mom and dad, or mom or dad, did Canute really think he could command the sea? You might pause and talk about that. The next question, what lesson did Canute want to teach his men? You might pause and talk about that. Who is the king who Canute says is all powerful, and it is he who rules the sea? You might pause and talk about that. And you might also name other famous kings who showed the virtue of humility in some of our previous stories. All right, that's the end of lesson 16 in our history. Hope you enjoyed his story. We'll do history lesson 17.